from my experience from working with businesses globally as well as here in Asia, it's clear that businesses understand their need for thriving communities, for access to customers, to employees, for sustained access to resources and markets. Businesses also recognize the market value of trust and reputation of their brand, and they understand that harming the environment or people, especially vulnerable people, can actually be quite costly in that context. I think businesses do want to be part of the solution and want to get rid of the stigma of being seen as part of the problem. It's the role of governments to set the framework conditions that ensure that economic development can thrive without harming the environment and people. And given the powerful role that businesses play today, I think it's perfectly justified to expect that business contributes to development and invests in solutions to global challenges. And of course, I think it is important to point out that there are many businesses that are already providing innovative solutions and are driving the agenda for sustainable economic development. In the context of climate change, I think we've seen that mainly businesses are engaging with mitigation so far, but are increasingly also understanding adaptation needs. But I think that is exactly the point where the discussion also in forums like these now needs to focus. How can we improve and work together with business to incentivize engagement in adaptation specifically? What I think is very much needed is a fruitful dialogue between governments, communities, businesses, climate change experts, adaptation experts, development experts, on the best way to ensure that sustainable development goals, which I think are common to all of the players, are met and that adaptation is mainstreamed. Business is often missing around the table. At the same time, there are large expectations towards business in terms of funding and taking responsibility. But I think we've reached, but it's very clear that blaming business for the challenges we face, as well as simply expecting significant financial resources to finance development and adaptive capacities, without engaging business in a meaningful way, cannot be the solution. In fact, worse than that, I think it's a huge missed opportunity. Because for all the trouble I think we've seen through market failures, efficiency, effectiveness, and innovation to create solutions driven by demand are some of the things that business has proven to be very good at. Governments, international organizations, and development experts, I think, need to engage with business to really understand better what is needed to enable this innovative capacity and the growth opportunities that markets do have by ensuring framework conditions that incentivize businesses to contribute to safeguarding the environment and investing in issues like adaptation.
So, Lina, if you could conclude, maybe?
Yes.
Trying to be very strict,
but business
moderate.
will be hesitant to react to mixed signals, and I think that is something we need to talk about here. If business is to be incentivized to invest, we need much more clarity. I'm not sure what kind of a signal the private sector and the markets are getting from spaghetti bowls of financing and failing climate talks. Certainly isn't an encouraging investment signal, I would argue. We've actually recently been talking quite a lot to businesses about climate change adaptation in the context of a project that we're working on with CEDA, and are hearing exactly these types of responses as well. The discussion is confusing, the topic seems to be riddled with unclarity, there are issues with jargon and abstract concepts, and businesses may have very clear response mechanisms, but they might not be actually set in the context of the policy debates, or businesses may not be very inclined to engage in those for the reasons I've mentioned. I think one last important point to make is that when we're talking about a sustainable role for business in financing adaptation, we cannot, or at least not simply, talk about making financial resources available from private sector sources. We should be talking about the framework conditions and processes needed to incentivize private strategies for and investment in adaptation to ensure that business does become part of the solution. So just to summarize and leave you with those points, business as an important stakeholder and with, I think, a huge potential in terms of innovative capacity and resources needs to be engaged if this capacity is to be harnessed. And given the enormity of the challenges we face, quite frankly, I think we cannot miss the opportunity for fruitful partnerships and collaboration mechanisms, and need to think much more constructively about the potential investment capacity of the private sector. And very importantly, business needs to be at the table for this discussion on the needs, opportunities, and challenges.
Thank you so much. At least we have you at the table, so that's a good sign. Very important private sector point of view, and I would like to call on our last panel intervention, Bob Dobias from ADB. If you could please present us your thoughts for the way forward.
Thank you. So I see we have, we're 2 minutes to 12, and so I will truncate my remarks. I was asked to talk about, to look forward, and to look at global, regional, national, local levels. On the global level, perhaps there will be a lot of discussion about what happened in Tianjin and what will happen in Cancun, but I think there's the one thing that is very clear, and to paraphrase my vice president of this morning, this climate change battle is going to be won or lost here in Asia and the Pacific. And there's a great urgency in our dealing with this issue. So when we're talking about financing and how we deal with the financing issue, it's very important that we come up with something through the UN negotiation process. But I think the region is going to move forward, has been moving and will continue to move forward regardless of what happened in Copenhagen and what will happen in Cancun. So having said that, on the regional level, that's perhaps all I'll say at the global level. On the regional level, there have been some interesting discussions just during the past week and a half that I've been out of Manila. Two of them dealt with regional platforms. How do we move forward at the regional level? In the Pacific, there was consideration of a regional platform that would provide financing, knowledge, and technical expertise, and particularly building local technical expertise together in a platform for the region. In Northeast Asia, there was very preliminary discussions of looking at the possibility of a regional emissions trading system. Now that, of course, Japan has still their emerging system. China recently announced that it would be looking at a domestic ETS, Korea, and so on. So looking now at how we might be able to address this regionally to build financing. At ADB, we've been working with partners, and partnership is so important. We've been working with partners looking into a social stock exchange that would offer an opportunity for entrepreneurs and investors to get together. And we've only started looking at how climate change might work into this idea of a social stock exchange in Asia. And the private sector already mentioned, but very importantly, providing the incentives, and some things are being looked at here in terms of risk pooling, looking at bringing in, for example, P8, the big pension funds and so on, to get together, look at opportunities for financing. And this is not just on the mitigation side, it's also importantly on adaptation. Looking at the national and local level, now my handwriting got smaller, I'll put on my glasses. Very importantly, when we talk about financing, of course we need to talk about getting programs together and ensuring that they're integrated into national and sectoral strategies and policies and national budgets. Without that, it'll be very difficult, and the spaghetti problem is magnified many times without that focus also at the national level and integration there. I think it was mentioned already, the real need to have some finance-ready programs and projects so that when the money is available, that it can be put to use quickly. And capacity building. Capacity building is so important, but perhaps it's not something that we have the luxury to build and then do other things. Perhaps what we need to do is to learn while we're doing, start moving and learning while we're doing, and adapt as we're going forward. South-South exchange in terms of how we use money wisely will be very important. And once again, I'd like to repeat what was said earlier. The meeting that we had the past 2 days was very instructive in how countries can talk to one another and learn from their experiences on how best to move forward. And finally, the local level, none of this is going to mean a whole lot if we don't get the financing down to communities, and that will be that's a whole issue of discussion in itself. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bob, for those thoughts. I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. We have a half an hour before the lunch. I'm going to take a number of those questions. So please, if you have a specific question to any of the panel members, particularly if you could indicate that. I would like to ask the colleagues on the panel to take notes. So, floor is open. Who's going to start? Right here, please. If you can also introduce yourself and your organization.
I'm Professor Rakshit from the Asian Institute of Technology, AIT. Maybe I should provoke the provocateur a bit. Just about the double fine accounting aspect of it. When you look at it closely again, when you differentiate between mitigation and adaptation, it's a little bit clearer in the case of mitigation, what is the investments made. But when you look at adaptation, then it sort of overlaps with development aid already. So that makes the accounting even further difficult. So I'd just like to hear from you about how they're trying to handle it in Cancun, maybe.
Thank you. We're going to take a few more questions, comments, please. Tomo?
Thank you. My name is Tom Uno, UNDP Indonesia Country Office, and I work in climate change. Thank you for the diverse presentations coming from different angles. It was really interesting. Just to talk about national policy frameworks, I think that was mentioned as something important for countries to manage climate change finance, to have funding frameworks and a coherent national policy framework to direct that climate change finance. Now, regarding that, I have a question for Mr. Gerard from AFD. You talked about the climate change policy loan, or program loan, sorry. We have this in Indonesia, so it's Japan, World Bank, and AFD. What I understand is there is a policy matrix for climate change to manage this, this general budget support. However, this is a general budget support mechanism, and we also have this thing called the Indonesia Climate Change Trust Fund that UNDP is supporting. And I was wondering how to integrate the general budget support level policy matrix with a more, maybe a more intricate or detailed policy matrix that we would use for the Indonesia Climate Change Trust Fund, which we're now developing. Because this is more targeted at specific interventions that line ministries think are priorities. So if we could have your thoughts on how to combine these policy matrices, or if there's any thinking already going on, how do you bring down a general budget support level policy matrix into more specific intervention level thinking? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, yeah, ladies first, and then in the back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the presenters for the very interesting presentations. And my comment would be...
Sorry, could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I met Tom and Tamara yesterday, so I forgot. My name is Suzanne Sitorus from Indonesia, the National Council on Climate Change. My comment will be on the outstanding questions on adaptation finance that were mentioned by the provocateur. I think I would like to add one more question that was not covered in your list. That is, in what form the adaptation finance will be, because I think there is still a disagreement, whether it should be loan or only grant, or it can be both. As we know, in the UNFCCC forum, the developing countries prefer that the full adaptation, the full cost of adaptations is borne by developed countries and provide